Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Dynamics Corner, the podcast where we dive deep into all things Microsoft Dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned expert or just starting your journey into the world of Dynamics 365, this is your place to gain insights, learn new tricks, and hear from industry experts, even for Teslas that I'm driving on this episode. I'm your host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode is recorded on June 29th, 2023. Kris.
Yes, sir.
You're in a new environment. I am
in a new environment.
And we have the opportunity to talk about why you're there, where you are, and what you're doing. And we also had the opportunity to speak with an industry expert.
Been around longer than you.
Yes. We finally have a guest that has been in this community longer than me. We were able to speak with Henrik Helgesen. Kris, what are you doing?
This is pretty cool. I'm actually out of town right now doing this podcast. And, I remember going to Scottsdale, and our guest has a Tesla, and I rented a Tesla to see how it is. So I'm in a Tesla.
So you're recording the podcast from a Tesla. Are you driving or is it driving itself?
No. I wish I'm still trying to figure out how to use this thing.
Well, maybe we could take a moment and we can give you a lesson as we start talking about that.
I know, right?
Because with us today we have Henrik.
Henrik.
I'll try to pronounce your last name. I'm so bad with everybody's last name, but maybe you can say it.
Helgesen.
That's exactly how I was going to say it. How could I couldn't even have messed that up. This would have been the one time I said it properly.
Well, it's that's the English version of it, right?
Okay.
But it's all good.
Oh, so what's the non-English version?
Well, in Denmark, we pronounce that L, or actually the G more as a J, so it's Helgesen.
Helgesen.
Oh.
Yeah.
Helgesen. Henrik Helgesen.
Yep.
I have to learn how to pronounce these names.
We're not that many Helgesens in the U.S. Even in Denmark, there's not that many. So. I always, I know there's a company in Wisconsin called Helgesen Industries, and I'm banking on that being my rich uncle. But we'll see if that works out.
My kid's principal, who retired last year, his name was Helgesen.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah.
So maybe you could do. They have those DNA tests. You could do. Maybe you could take one of those tests and somebody there could take it and you can find out.
Yeah. I actually did that on Ancestry.com, and even Ancestry.com didn't quite in the beginning know that Denmark was. Oh no, you're from Scandinavia, and that was kind of how they narrowed it down. Yeah, a little more, but it's okay.
I did that early on, and they kept updating the results, and then I had a lot of strange people starting to contact me, so then I hit everything.
Yeah. I haven't had that. I mean, I've gotten a couple of, you may know your seventh cousin or something. No, I don't. But
that's good. So Kris is in a Tesla. Before we get started with the conversation, maybe we can give Kris a quick lesson on how to get driven around by the Tesla.
Well, I mean, it depends on if it actually has the full self-automated driving. Yeah. I mean, that's how I drove from LA to Scottsdale. And what I found is, I mean, you still have to pay attention, right? But what I like about that is when you, after that long of a drive, you get there and you're not super exhausted, right? Because you haven't spent all your energy focusing on driving. You just, make sure everything goes wrong and hit the brake when the guys who can't bear being behind you wants to pass you and cut you off. But on that is good. But it's two taps down on the right lever enables the autopilot.
on the right lever. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll have to play around with that because it is pretty interesting. I mean, we were trying to figure out like how do you turn this car? Do I have to press the button?
Nope.
You
Nope.
know,
Nope.
you don't. Yeah.
Nope. And it's kind of been a problem for me. I mean, I was early in the electric car world. I had a Fiat 127
The Spider.
electric.
Oh, electric.
And I was able to annoy some people in a Maserati because they thought they could get away from me, and they could not. But then I'm one of the ones that signed up on day one for the Model 3, and I still have it, and I enjoy it. But yes, it is one of those where, I mean, your cell phone is your key, right? So as you walk up to your phone, you open it with your phone in your pocket, right? You open the door, you tap it, and you go. So now every time, if I drive my wife's car and we're going to the grocery store or something like that, I walk out of the car and she always, you have to turn it off. Oh, that's right. So, but yeah, it's weird at first, but now, I go somewhere, I park, I walk out, I don't lock the door. The car does it for me when I'm far enough away. So
yeah, I did notice that. It is pretty interesting. I do love it. We did it just to see if it's the right car for us.
Mm-hmm.
In Washington State, they have the highest gas price in the nation at $5.20 a gallon on average, and so this to me was like a test run. So I think I'm sold.
But you still have to pay for electricity. There's some things with the Teslas. I don't have a Tesla. And Henrik, the one thing you mentioned, I don't have a fancy Tesla, but I have adaptive cruise control and lane assist. Mm-hmm. And the lane assist it doesn't steer you. It just lets you know if you're veering, it will shake your car and give you beep, 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 beep. But the adaptive cruise control I use all the time on the highway, and you were right, because sometimes I have to drive an hour or so, and you're not as tired afterwards because you don't have to pay attention. You do have to pay attention, excuse me. You don't have to brake, gas. Like somebody comes, the vehicle will slow, speed up to the speed that you set. It's wonderful. And I was driving the other day and I saw somebody in a Tesla and I'm like, I need to get one of those because he's sitting there. He was paying attention. I'm not going to say he wasn't, but he's drinking. He has like stuff in his hands and like, what a way to drive. Going down the highway.
I mean, it actually, I mean, it surprised me a little bit because, I don't do a lot of driving these days. I mean, like everybody else, I'm, stuck at home. But, so as I'm driving home from Scottsdale, all of a sudden the blinker goes on and it turns out in the fast lane to pass whoever I was stuck behind. I mean, it just does that by itself. I mean, it's just kind of it's crazy. I mean, it's I
would freak out. I wouldn't know what to do.
No, so you just go, oh, okay, well, what just happened? But it's good. And speaking of the charging, right? I mean, I have a charger at home, and luckily I live in a city. We have our own water and power, so at night I pay 8.5 cents per kilowatt. So I plug it in, and I don't think about it. My electricity bill haven't gone up drastically because of it.
Yeah, see, that's a selling point right there, right? Because it's just so easy. I mean, you don't ever have to worry about going to a gas station. Just charge it overnight, and that's
I haven't been to a gas station in 5 years.
Yeah,
something else with that someone had talked to me about, and I didn't think about it. You don't have to get an oil change either.
Nope. And I mean, I was just thinking about it. So I've had mine for a little over 5 years now. So Tesla does a thing where a lot of the service calls they'll come to you, right? So you don't have to go sit in a dealership and wait for 2 hours for them to do something that takes them 5 minutes, right? It's great. There was a recall on the charging port thing, and they sent me a message, hey, we would like to come and do this. Can you please schedule that? And I did, and the guy showed up. Hey, how are you doing? Ding, 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 ding. And thank you. You're good to go. Have a good day. Right? I mean, so that convenience to me is worth a lot.
That's worth a lot right there, to not have to go to a gas station, not go to a dealer or a garage. to have service done and sit there and wait for them to shuffle around.
And and the most expensive thing I did was I changed my cabin filters. Right, so that was a couple of $100 for them to come and do that. I've since seen a YouTube video how you can do it yourself, but I'm just kind of like sometimes, but it takes that guy 15 minutes. It's going to take me an hour to make, and do I even have the right tool to do it? So that's where I'm thankfully in a situation where I'm just kind of, but I can sit and get some work done while he does that, right?
Yes.
So,
and that charge right there, I call it a convenience fee. So it's worth it. Some of those things, like you say, it's a couple $100 or whatever it may be. But to me, some things have that value. It's just like when we do work. If there's value to it, it's worth it. So for you to not have to deal with your vehicle and learn how to do something and buy special tools,
And to me, I've never been a car guy. I know, as a boy, you're supposed to be obsessed with cars. It's never interested me a single bit. But
I'm right there with you.
If you like doing it, hey, by all means, do it. So.
Yeah, that's just like buying an Apple device, right? It just works. Yep. I mean, Tesla's the same. You just use it when you need it, and so no, you've had your Tesla for a while.
Mm-hmm.
As a consultant, I mean, you really don't put a lot on it. So
nope.
Yeah, so that means it's like the right car for a consultant.
I mean, even if you drive a lot, I think it's a great car. I mean, again, somebody said this a couple of years ago, and kind of, what's the last thing you do at night before you go to bed? You plug in your cell phone. Why is it any different than you pull into your garage and plug in your car, right? So superchargers are great for long distance driving, but I don't use it for day-to-day driving. I mean, I actually, because I bought it on day one, I do have unlimited supercharging, and that's great. But I mean, I use it when I do long distance driving, not on a regular basis.
That's all amazing. And I agree with you. It's a lot of times people will say things or make comments, but like you said, if it becomes part of your life or there's other things that you do, don't just pick at it. It's just something that you need to do for something. So Kris, how is it driving that? I've never driven a Tesla.
So it's a weird, I mean, Henrik could probably tell you a little bit of it. As a first-time driver of a Tesla, it's like a golf cart where you just press the gas, and if you don't press the gas, it like slows down. It doesn't have that rolling coast when you have your typical gas-powered car where you just press on gas, let it go and just coast. No, this one you have to like really just press on it, and I don't ever press the gas. I mean the brake, really.
and you can actually, there's a setting for that if you want it the old school way. But I mean, what it does is,
that out.
But what it does, right? It's using that force to charge the battery, regenerative charging, right? So.
Well, this is good. So we turn this into a Tesla episode, obviously.
I know, and again, I'm not a car guy. I am not one of those Elon Musk and Tesla can do no wrong, because they certainly can. But to me, it's a car. I know some people are really obsessed about their car, or, oh my God, it got a speck of dust there. I need to get it washed and detailed right away. I'm just going to... My car is I mean, I like to keep it clean, but ultimately it's something I use for transportation.
Yes.
And
you and I are the same. I'm not a car person by any means. I get in it, I drive to where I need to go. Some small things I'll do on it, but I'll leave it at that. And I try to drive as little as possible too.
Yeah.
And not because I want to save the miles on the vehicle. I drive as little as possible because I hate driving. So I prefer to stay at home or ride a bicycle or something in a safe area. So that's good. So Kris, you have to try to see if you have that self-assisted driving or assisted driving.
I will be playing
service.
with it a little bit more. Because here's the thing.
Are you buying one?
And here's the thing. Reason why we're renting it, because we're thinking about replacing something, and then we can drop about the Tesla stuff and talk about Henrik's history and dynamics. But my wife works probably 2 miles away from home, and one of the things that struggles is that gas is so expensive. So, when you're driving in a short distance on a SUV, it can get pretty expensive and it causes a lot of wear and tear in your car. So we wanted to just have something that just like, hey, just go in and out, neighborhood driving kind of thing, and still be able to do our typical, home needs.
2 miles, Chris. 2 miles? She'll hate me for saying this. Get her a scooter, electric scooter, a bicycle.
Right?
I was 2 miles.
I was thinking the same thing, honestly.
We definitely are. See, we're related, I think.
Yeah.
I could say that, but she's a teacher, so they carry a lot of stuff with them, right?
Backpack.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the Chris, the things you're talking about here.
Just getting a golf cart. That's it.
Well, you just have to look at the rules for driving golf carts in here. But I think give her a backpack and one of those nice electric scooters, and I think she'll be fine. They even have some with those big wheels, so that when it becomes wintertime up there in Seattle, she can drive, in the rain. And if you get any snow, which you guys don't get snow in Seattle, do you?
We do, but we live out in the woods, so really the trees really cover the road, so it's not as bad.
Okay, we get a lot of snow up here. I know, Henrik, you get a lot of snow too, don't you?
Oh yeah, I mean at least 1/10 of an inch every 10 years. Yeah.
That's a lot. See, that is it. So anyway, no, thank you for joining us. We just had that brief intro for the unexpected Tesla conversation. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in hearing more about how Kris enjoys or doesn't enjoy driving that Tesla while he's away on vacation. But can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing. Well, Henrik Helgesen, and as you currently live in LA, or specifically in Burbank, California. And no, I'm not quite born in downtown LA, quite a ways from there. I'm born and raised in Denmark, and started working with Navigator, as it was called back in those days, in version 3.53, running on a Unix box on a IBM RISC 6000. And,
you have me beat.
Yep.
So Kris, we found someone. We found someone. A true dinosaur.
Older than you.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, yeah. And I, David Singleton came up with that. David Singleton came up with that badge of honor, I call it. Calling those of us that's worked with this for a long time for dinosaurs. I'm a proud dinosaur. It's some people feel offended by it. I'm a dinosaur. I'm old school, for better or worse, right? But yeah, so I started there. I worked at a furniture manufacturer as an internal IT guy, and they had just implemented this and manufacturing and MRP and all that fun stuff. And I did some adjustments for them. I was sent off to a 1 week long report writers class kind of a thing. And after being there for about 2 years, I literally sat and twiddled my thumbs, and there was nothing else for me to do. Oh, and wow. I went on that thing, the internet, back in the days when you had to listen to the ding 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 ding, right? On a
1200 baud modem,
something like that. Yep. And there was a website in Denmark for job hunters, and I put on my resume there, and lo and behold, a month or so later, I got a text message on my Nokia 2110 that I had gotten an email. That's long ago, and that a company wanted to get contacted. So I called up the guy, and I drove out there, and I was hired. That he called me Sunday if I could do it, and we argued a little bit back and forth on pay, and we landed on a number that was fine, and I was sent off to a developers class, and this is back in the day when what's it, PCNC, I want to say it was, that was a company behind Navigator, and they actually back in those days, each developer had their own personal license, so I had a license file with my name on it.
I remember that with Navision when they came to the U.S. that each developer had their own license file with a name.
Yep. And so I went to a class for the old Navigator, the text-based one, for a week, I want to say, and a month after I was shipped off to a class for Navision Financials 1.0, 1.1, I forget. And I shortly thereafter was shipped off to the U.S. to Lufkin, Texas, to do a project. A company that it was a death care company. They owned cemeteries and funeral homes. And fun fact, they're the very first person I met in this country. I'm sure you guys know her. Kim Dallefeld was the one that picked me up at the airport.
Wow.
And
yes, we know Kim.
And we worked together on a project in Lufkin, Texas, for a couple of months. And there was another Danish guy there that from the same company I worked with, and I learned the hard way in the sense of, in the good way, I want to say. He would literally take subtasks and explain to me, this is what we need. I would do that one task, and he would look at the code, and I tell this story, and I've told this story many times. I literally written a return check wizard where, probably 50, 80, 100 lines of code. And he said, well, if you use validate, you don't need this stuff. So, so my code just ended up, shrinking to about this much. But, I learned a lot from that, and I'm very grateful for actually having that opportunity and learning on the job, right? This was in 97, I want to say. I did that. So then I was back to Denmark, and I got and the company I worked for, and I had kind of gotten into a little bit of a rut because and after a couple of years, right, in Denmark, projects only get to a certain size. That's just, companies aren't as big as they are here. So I got an opportunity to go to do a project for a partner in the Twin Cities, and it happened to be that their end customer was actually a Danish company. So calling over there and asked to speak with Henrik, coincidentally, and getting a response back, which one? I was just kind of, oh wait, I'm confused now. But I ended up ultimately moving to the Twin Cities and working with a end customer in medical devices.
Of all places to end up in the United States, you picked that area.
You know what? Minnesota, nice. There's definitely something to that. I miss some of my Minnesota thing. I do not miss the mosquitoes. I do not miss the winters.
The winter.
Although you know what, in Minnesota, at least when it's winter, you can go snowmobiling, right? In Denmark, when it snows, it's just and then 2 days later, it's sturdy snow or it's halfway melted. So there's something to that. But I always say, I guess it's the curse of life, because that company actually had season tickets to the newly started Minnesota Wild, and that's how I got into hockey. And when I ultimately moved to California, that's how I met my wife at a LA Kings game. So I had to learn to appreciate hockey before I moved here, so I could meet my wife. So
look at all you had to do to meet her, and I'm sure she appreciates the journey that you made all the way from Denmark to come over to LA via Minnesota to learn hockey, so that you can meet her.
And I've worked for a couple of different partners. I went out on my own as a freelancer probably about 10 years ago now, and I worked. I don't work with a lot of different customers, but the customers I work with, I tend to have a very long-term relationship with. So it's been a very interesting. It's one of those things. I actually like what I do, so it's hard to complain.
No, it's good to enjoy what you do. I know I am very passionate about what I do, and I enjoy it. and I can say I love what I do too. You go all the way back to Navigator. See, I don't even think I've ever seen it. I saw the character-based version of Navision before, because it was like version 1.1.1 when I first started with it as well, when they first came to Norcross, Georgia. That was my first day on the job. I flew down to Atlanta or Norcross to go through the training. And I did see some screens of the character-based version because they had it there, but was that the Navigator version? That was still Navision, wasn't it? The character-based version?
Well,
Navigator was before that.
Navigator was the Danish version. I think Navision was
I remember that.
Was the Americanized.
Okay.
But then there was also Avista, and I mean, it was just kind of like they kind of did some branding things. But yeah, the good old blue text-based version.
I remember that screen.
Yep.
Wow, so you've been through it all. A lot of changes over the years too, from the days of them owning it and then selling it to Microsoft, and Microsoft taking it under their umbrella.
I mean, I remember the day Damgård Data and Navision Software merged.
For Exapta, correct?
Yes.
Damgård had Exapta, and that's when they did the merger.
And C5. And I mean, I was doing a training class actually on for some clients, and all of a sudden I hear some commotion in the office, and I think it's around lunchtime. So we are getting ready to do a break in the classroom I'm teaching in, and everybody's just around the monitor, kind of like, what? Because it's for those that don't know. I mean, back in those days, if you went to CeBIT, for instance, in Hanover, big IT trade show, when you saw Navision Software's booth and you saw Damgård Data booth, those were two very different approaches to doing stuff, and it's one of those, like, to me, imagine PepsiCo and Coca-Cola merging. I mean, that's kind of that's how that merger kind of felt to a lot of people. And then when it was bought by Microsoft, it was just kind of like, oh boy, what's going to happen now? So
that was a big shift. I remember for us in the United States, the Damgård Navision merger, as you would call it, I don't think we understood the impact of it or had the same feeling as you had. It was, we had Navision, baby Navision and big Navision, I guess you could call it, right? They had, because they were different markets for it. But then when the Microsoft purchase went through, that's when everybody said, what's happening to Navision? Because there was talks of back then, and we've spoken about this before with guests on, everyone thought Navision was going away and everyone was going to GP or even, Solomon. They had all those plans. Remember Project Green to consolidate everything and merge into one. So, and here we are. So now you're working with the product, doing consulting, and now Microsoft owns it. And to me, it seems like they've turned up the heat a little bit. When they first bought it, I think things stayed pretty status quo. Small incremental changes here and there. Yeah, and now it's rapid fire.
It's funny. I mean, speaking of Project Green, I remember actually I was on a flight from Seattle to Copenhagen, and it was one of the first flights where SAS put Wi-Fi on the planes because of that Microsoft Copenhagen thing. And I happened to sit next to a guy who worked for Microsoft, and I said, "Oh, so Project Green, huh?" And the look on his face was kind of, yeah, we already said too much about that. he was done with that subject. But no, I mean, what I heard, and again, this is what I heard. I'm by no matter a history expert. I actually heard Microsoft bought Navision Damgård because they wanted Exapta. Right, that's where they saw the thing. But then, as they owned it, right, they kind of, at some point in time, I think Navision outsold Exapta, GP, Solomon combined, and it just kept doing it. So I'm happy that they finally did something and consolidated the things. I mean, because let's be honest, you can't feasibly maintain 4 or 5 different ERP products, right? That's just not going to happen. So
there's a big staff would be required for that. And then how do you choose what functionality to put where?
Yep.
You can have a, SMB product that can fit small to medium-sized businesses and enable or disable features or not use the features. And you have one code base that you can implement. And then for some of those larger enterprise products, Business Central does work for some large enterprise companies, but then you also have FNSCM, which was AX, Exapta, Navision's bigger brother, I guess you could call it.
Right. But I mean, I think sometimes people look at it the wrong way, right? Because when I was in Minnesota, I worked at a company that did medical devices. Right, we did 2,000 orders a day, and out of those, 1,900 we had production planning, right? And we did that on Navision 3.7, I want to say. So so a lot of people always like to say, oh, based on your revenue numbers, you should go this way. And no, it completely depends on what it is you do. And they, while yes, each of these medical devices were custom made, it for the bill of materials, it was just an assembly bond, right? It's you need this, you need this, you need this, and it was a little different based on each order, depending on what they ordered and the configuration of such. But it wasn't rocket science, right?
No, so you do bring up a good point, because I always get those questions. Oh, we need to do 10,000 orders a day, or how many orders can you do a day, or what can we put through here, or how many items can we have? And I always say it's not the number of orders that you do, or how much, like you said, the revenue that you have. How big are those orders? What are you doing with those orders? Are you using warehousing? There's so many pieces to it that I could see that you could have one order that has 45 billion lines on it that could not work well with Business Central, or you could have, 700,000 orders of one line item that you don't do anything with that would work really well. So there's I think you have to look at everything in context versus just
and it's orders. Also, and I actually have. One of my very few posts on my blog, actually, I have a thing on, I'm very, to me, when people talk performance, I'm much more focused on user experience, right? Does the user have to sit like this, or can they do something and then move on, right? And that's actually one of the things we did on that particular solution, where we didn't have job queues at the time, but we had the NAS, the Navision application server. Yes. So we basically built a semi-job queue where when you release a sales order, we would, do some rudimentary tests. Do we have all the data we need? Yada, yada, yada. And then we created a production planning request entry, right? Just like standard nav, when you release a sales order, if you use warehousing, it dumps in a record in the warehouse request. It's kind of like, hey, whenever you get a chance to look at warehouses, I look at me, right? And the same thing we did for production planning. And then we had a job queue using the NAS to okay, look at this production order, do production order planning for this, and so forth. And what we actually found was, because we had 8 to 10 people entering orders, right, and doing MRP on every order. They kept blocking each other, right? But when we put it into that structure, it's kind of, well, now it's a serial process, so we only did one at a time, and we had a bunch of KPIs because every day people, oh, the system is slow today. It's kind of, well, actually, if you look at this, the average time to release the orders today is this, and yesterday it was this, so it's actually faster today than it was yesterday. But we saw by doing that, we've almost cut the time in half for every order to go through MRP, because it never got locked, right? So, when you have high volume, you use some of the tools that are available. And again, as I said, user experience. If the user can press the button, release, and then move on to the next one, who cares if the production planning is done right now or it's done 2 minutes from now?
I agree with you. And a couple of thoughts come into my mind. One, you talked about some of the solutions that we used to do way back in the day because it wasn't within the application. But if you look at the evolution of the product, you kind of have to look back and go, I was onto something, because, with the background processing, you hear of all these things that get added over time. So, you were onto something. And user experience is key, because I think that often gets overlooked. And I think sometimes you hear how does this work? Is it slow? Or, hey, this is slow. And sometimes, to me, a lot of that is perception.
Perception, yeah, that's a big deal.
One part, it's, I can only go from Boston to Los Angeles so fast, right? So what am I doing? What's my expectation is my expectation realistic for what I'm actually doing? Because if I'm doing a big task, realistically, it's going to take time to get done. What can I do to make the experience better? I can break it up into smaller pieces, so that it's almost like you're driving or you're doing something. You go to Disney World, you stand in line for these rides. They put you keep moving, and they give you like little experiences, and you stood in line for over an hour and you don't even realize it, because they broke it up for you so that you were entertained in that case. And I also feel with these, I have these conversations. If you tell me to find a problem, I will. You ask me if it's slow or works better, I'm going to tell you it's slow. It's just that psychology. Like, I feel like I should say it's slow, instead of, like you were talking about, what's your experience to go through with your processing, and what needs to be done for that user's experience versus the secondary piece. And I think a lot of times it all goes with how the application gets implemented for the scenarios that you're in, versus let's just get it done, release a sales order, and we'll do everything. We'll do all the reservations. I can't even believe I said that word, but we'll do all the reservations, all the manufacturing. Yeah, I wouldn't even go down that road, but it's gosh, see, we could even just sit here and talk about stories as Kris is sitting over there in his Tesla. Kris, you driving or you just parked?
No, I'm parked. It's like, it's pretty cool. It's pretty comfortable. Really comfortable.
Good.
Are you, is it raining there?
No. My kids were surprised. It's like, well, it's not a sunroof. And I'm like, no, it's just glass. That's it.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
I like those openers. So you've worked with the application for quite some time, and you've got to see the evolution of the application, and as well as you've gone through the transition from Cal to AL, and you've seen everything with this application. So what do you think about where they've gone with the product? And where they're heading with the product?
I think we've definitely moved ahead, right? I mean, I would say in the old days, right, you as a developer could know basically the entire application, right? And you could do stuff, right? And in everywhere, in every granule, right? Today, that's no longer the case, right? I mean, you can know something, or you can know everything in a particular area. So that is, I mean, and that's a little hard to admit for a dinosaur like myself, because I definitely used to know everything. I mean, I still remember when I was in Minnesota, I was asked to do something, and they wanted to change the account schedule so you could do this, that, and the other. After he spent half an hour, 45 minutes to explain to me what he wanted me to do, I looked at him kind of like, why don't you just use account schedules? And he was, what do you mean? Here, let me show you account schedules. And he was going, oh my God, I didn't even know this was here. I'm so embarrassed. We got, well, but it's that's just the way it goes, right? But there's also a difference from when there was a new version every 5 years, right, as to now, where there's new features added. I mean, if not monthly, at least every couple of months, right? So it's hard to keep up, and yet that even changes some of the development practices, right? I mean, you may be aware that I am one of the four guys who started alguidenites.dev, and one of the patterns there, Waldo had created the generic method pattern, and I just saw a tweet this week that doing the doing BC Tech Days last week in Antwerp, they talked a lot about interfaces, and Waldo even tweeted, "Yep, that this basically means the generic method pattern is now an anti-pattern." Right? So it's things change.
It changes rapidly. And to your point,
Yes.
back when the dinosaurs were working with it, the updates were, if you got them once a year, like you had mentioned, that was rare. And the application had a small pocket. They had the manuals. So you, as a consultant or a developer working with the application, you were forced to know it. And you know it because you had the information. Now, fast forward to today, now it's, okay, which runtime am I working with? Okay, did they add this in 11.1 or 11.2 and version 22.3? There's so much that you have to keep up with, and they add so much to the application. I try to say that you won't know everything. Don't try to know everything. You can be familiar. You can be familiar with some things. If you're a developer, stay up to date with the development patterns, understand what's going on with the application and how it works, right? Because it can help you develop better. I think if you understand the functionality and you're aware of what's going on. But trying to know it all is extremely difficult because it changes too.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm also very cautious of, I always add one more caveat. If you don't understand accounting, you don't touch my ERP.
100%.
Because I've seen some weird stuff where it's kind of like, no, that's not how debits and credits work, right? I mean, if you don't, I'm not saying you have to be a CPA by no means, but you need to understand what a debit is, what a credit is, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. Yes, there is some basic accounting that is needed, and I agree with you there. There are some business skills that you need to have, some basic skills that if you're working on an ERP implementation or application that you need to understand to do it successfully. So, and one thing that I find, and I mentioned, years when we first started out, the information was so hidden, protected. Yes. Now I have noticed a big shift from Microsoft over the past couple of years that they are basically throwing everything out on the table, as far as documentation, as far as collaboration and information that they're sharing and feedback. Because before it was, you had to be really in the know to provide feedback or get information. But now it's, they'll talk with anybody that's, reasonable about issues, questions, suggestions. So it becomes more of an engaging product. The only thing that I become fearful of as I'm going this, maybe it's just because I'm getting older, is there ever a point where there's too much? Is there ever a point where there's so much in the application that it becomes unusable, right? So now we have the collaboration effort that's going through that's great with Jesper. I enjoy that as well. And you have all these other things that are being done, but is there a point where it's too much?
I think it's one of those where, I got two things to that. I mean, when you say, Microsoft is much more open to feedback today than they were years ago. Absolutely, and I come from the time where works as designed were the de facto answer, right, from Navision and or Microsoft, right? And I remember when I worked in Minnesota, I found a bug in the product where it actually did an item.get production order.number, right? So the demo data, of course, the first 3 production orders had overlapping numbers with items. So I submitted a thing to Microsoft. Here's how to reproduce it. And the response back was, "Oh, you're not a partner." The end, right? So I said, all right, 2 can play this game. I knew a guy that worked at a partner in California. I knew people that worked in Denmark. So I just sent it to all of them. Hey, can you please submit this one, right? I mean, so today, yes, they're much more reasonable to. And for the second one, I also remember when I don't know if it was Microsoft or Navision Software that started pushing all this. Oh, everything has to be in Navision or Avista or Alta Vista or whatever they called it at the time, right? where the service module. I mean, I'll be honest. It's it was built for a specific customer. They literally bought a customer solution to put in for that, right? And so I'm a firm believer in you do what you're good at, and I'll let you do what you're good at, right? I mean, I'm getting new Windows installed here in a couple of weeks.
I like that.
I'm not going to tell them how to install these Windows because I know nothing about that. My brother might be. He's a carpenter, but I know nothing. And my job here is to make sure they have food and drinks, and because that's how I treat my contractors. I buy them lunch. I buy them whatever they need because I want them to focus on that job. And I think too little effort has actually been done in using microservices. So, for instance, when it comes to shipping solutions, when it comes to EDI solutions, I've worked with those over the years, and I really like the approach that I think it's InsightWorks. They have a shipping solution, and it integrates with EasyPost, right? So EasyPost knows how to work with UPS, FedEx, and a whole slew of other carriers, right? Why do you want to, as a software developer, deal with that, right? I've seen too many times in my time working with eShip, and semi-shameless plug, I actually own eShipGuy.com, but I haven't actually worked with eShip for a long time. But I've been in a situation where FedEx changed the API, and all of a sudden eShip didn't work for FedEx anymore, right? So it's kind of like, do you want to deal with that, or do you actually want to let a company that's all they do, right? So yes, I think
that is a key. This is just enlightening. I don't mean to interrupt you, but go ahead, keep going. I'll say my comments after. Chris knows I like to interrupt.
That's perfectly fine. I do too. No, but focus your time on building that integration, and then building a solution that inside of Business Central supports that process.
Yeah, I love that.
Other people deal with that.
I like that a lot because there's benefits that you can get. And if you can focus on the integration, as Kris has mentioned too, is focus, and you don't try to do everything because there is a cost to maintaining that. And as you mentioned, now you have this big centralized application. If something changes, you have a problem. Whereas if you use microservices and you can have integrations, if I do something really well, I'll just focus on that one thing. I'll communicate with you, you communicate with me, we exchange. But now I worked with implementations where we separated EDI, warehouse management, in ERP. Mm-hmm. You know what happened when they had to switch EDI systems? Nothing happened to the warehouse. Nothing happened to the ERP software. They just had to change this bucket right here. And then so this whole part of the business was, business as usual. They dealt with these changes here, and they were able to work. So, and that software did EDI really well. Right, like you had mentioned, and they had a warehouse management system that interfaced with Nav, Business Central, Navision. I always say this every episode; I get confused. Yeah, that did warehouse management really well with all the features and functionality that they needed that wasn't in the ERP software. And I think a lot of times when you're doing solution architecture, it's important now to think outside of the ERP application, because maybe there's something that I could piece together like a puzzle to give you what you need. Or oftentimes, I don't know what you work with too much. You have implementations or somebody moving to Business Central and they say, well, we need to recreate this one small task. It's not an ERP application, but they have this one calculator. I worked with somebody that had this little calculator. You need to put this in Business Central. My question was, can't we just communicate with it? Oh yeah, we can. And you don't have to rewrite it. You don't have to maintain it. Just use that small external application that you're using. Right. And
Brad, you mentioned earlier about how when is it too much, and the way I see it right now is sometimes I find it's missed opportunities because there's so many new things that are coming out. It's hard to keep up, and sometimes you don't know that a customer may come to you and say, I need this, and that feature may have come out last week or a month ago, and you didn't know that. And because it's so hard to keep up, you do your day-to-day stuff, and then you try to build it and not realizing like, yeah, it's already out of the box. It was released like last wave.
Yes.
Yep.
So it's very interesting. So I think that's where the struggle is, at least from my perspective, is that I didn't know it was released. I didn't know that's a feature, things like that.
Yeah, well, it goes to Henrik's point of, you won't know everything now. But what I was getting with too much was, are there too many? Because a lot of times it's how you implement it, right? There's a lot of features and functionality that you can do something. And if you turn this on, I'm using some of the stuff loosely just for examples. It does one thing. If you turn it off, it does another thing. If you turn this on and this on, it does another thing. So it gets to become such more configuration, which is what you want, instead of modification or personalization, personalization, configuration instead of modification. But is there a point where you have so many options and features that it becomes, counterproductive to the application, where you can just focus? That's what I was trying to get at. Is there a point where you add too much into it? So that's where we kind of the microservices I agree with, but when do we say no?
But I think it's so the problem is, and being a developer here, I mean, developers rarely says no, right? I think that's actually one of my superpowers is I tell clients no, because I don't get any professional satisfaction out of doing something that makes zero sense to do, right? I mean, and I know it's hard to say no, because it's hard to say no to billable hours, but I mean, to me, I just but I don't want to do something for you, and now 6 months from now you're gonna resent me for building this that we could have done something else, right? So it is a hard, thin line. I mean, and I think it also goes a little bit to the app source or app store, right, where we have a couple almost 4,000 apps. I think I saw last time, right? I mean,
it changes every day.
Yeah,
at this point,
and to me, it's kind of like that's both good and bad, right? Because how do you filter through what actually works there, right? And my biggest concern is, okay, well, I like this solution. Oh, but I guess I'm one of the only ones, and now they decide, this is not worth it for us. Good day, right? I mean, so I think there need to be some sort of quality assurance there, and then there need to be some sort of, if this ISV goes away, that you can keep your source code. But I don't know how to do that, and that I think goes again to, well, when it's too much, right? When you have 15 solutions, I'll be honest with you, every time I see AR or AP automation, I want to vomit. Because, I mean, those solutions, I don't know how many there is at this point. I'm just kind of like, they all do the same thing. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah. Yes. I think having a few applications that do it well works better, because
Yep.
I repeat, rising tides raises all ships. You put a lot of bad implementations out there, a lot of bad applications, people will start talking about how bad of an experience they had with an application, and therefore there goes your sales. So you need to have the flexibility to allow the enhancement. Thankfully, we work now with events to extend the application, whereas when we first started out, if people didn't understand the application, they modified it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen standalone sales order entry systems because somebody couldn't figure out how to do something on a sales order within the vision. Or, they would go in and modify the core, code, posting code units because they could.
Oh, yeah, but have you ever seen the posting function being done in a report? Yeah, I have. Because they kept getting that consistency error, and it annoyed them. Yeah.
Yeah, so but at least now we have some guards there.
Right.
But that's some of the philosophical stuff I'm thinking about is how do you manage that, giving the growth and the flexibility to utilize technology, which they're doing. They're making development better. They're making performance better. Going from on-prem to SaaS to make it easier for somebody. They don't have to handle all the infrastructure. All these things are great changes. I was just thinking the functionality. It gets me. And now now we have a big web, right? We talk about these services. Now you have Power Platform,
Right.
that whole ecosystem that goes along with Business Central too. So maybe I'm just getting old.
But I think the one thing I like to say about this is, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? And I've said this about, and even for Power BI, because I remember at the very first Dynamics Con in California, Mary was there, and I forget the scenario, but somebody said, and Mary said, "Oh, we can do that in Power BI." Oh, sorry, in Power Apps, and do this and this and this and this, and everybody else, "Oh, that's great," and I'm just kind of, yeah, it's not a bad way, but that particular one where to me, the validation belongs in the ERP, right? There's other places where nope, I don't care about this in my ERP. Use Power Platform all you want. I'm okay with that. I mean, I think we and that means the consultants, the AL developers, the Power Platform guys. We need to kind of realize when should I do it? When should I let the other somebody else do it? Right? I mean, and I realize it's a hard one. I actually suggested at Dynamics Con to do we should do a throwdown. To get some examples where, well, we could do this in AL or we could do it in Power Platform. Let's see how long it would actually take to do this in AL and how much. And how can we do this in Power Platform? And
I remember that discussion.
I think it could be fun.
This is enlightening because I promote this a lot because I'm a technical developer working to it, but I understand business and application a lot. And I'm also in that fence of just because we can do it doesn't mean we have to do the minimum amount you need to solve the problem, right? Focus on the problem and come up with your solution. And you don't need to develop. If you need a bicycle, you don't need a Winnebago or a bus. You need a bicycle.
Yep.
It goes to what you're saying. So just because you have these fancy tools, and sometimes I find all these great tools that come out because everybody wants to use them because now they know the latest and greatest technology, adds sometimes a lot of complexity. Yep. Sometimes you do something very simple and basic to get the job done, and then you can move on and not have to maintain. It's the carrying cost of software is one of those things that's been, tattooed on the inside of my brain. Anything that you put together, you have to look at what does it cost to maintain that as a partner or as a business that has a solution.
Yeah, it's the cost of ownership.
Yep.
Yes, but you have to be careful because some people chalk it up to, okay, well, it's okay because that's the cost of doing business.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you do have costs of doing business, but do you need to have inflated costs of doing business? Right. Or could you see there's these play on words or things that individuals use, but you have to take it into the context of, yes, I do have business costs, but I don't need to spend money because I have a business.
Yeah, you really have to put that consulting hat every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time. Yeah.
I mean, it's. I mean, even when it comes to development and complexity, right? I actually have a real world example. I'm building something for a client right now where, so we're integrating with their website using MuleSoft, and they need to get accurate inventory data, but we have a lot of modifications on our inventory that just because we have it doesn't mean we can actually sell it, right? It may be quarantined, it may have a status that is not sellable and whatnot else. And of course, the MuleSoft guy said, well, we just want the net changes. And I was like, we can absolutely build something where we keep track of this item has any of the item ledger entries been changed, the status on, and whatnot else. And ultimately, we just said, you know what, we can do this, but the overhead on our end is going to be huge. I mean, huge. So we're going to just say, no, we're not going to do it, because what happens if a modification in 6 months get made that we now don't capture that event, right? So and now the inventory gets out of sync. So we just said, nope, you're gonna just get all the inventory numbers for all of these things, and you're just gonna have to deal with that. Or you can send us the specific one you want inventory for, and we will get you that. But it's, so again, that goes back to, sometimes it's okay to say no, and sometimes and it's kind of like, we can do this, but the cost is not worth it. And
Correct.
Moreover, the risk for down the road is not worth it.
Yeah, well, I think there's a saying I heard last week was, a great consultant says no.
Yep.
You have to say no, or why.
Yeah.
I often find myself saying why over and over again, and I sometimes need to explain, and I'm often cautious of my tone. I ask why sometimes, because if somebody can explain something to you, then it may validate what they're doing. Or you can say, why are you doing this? And they start to think, and they're like, we've all heard this, we've always done it this way.
Right.
Well, I really don't know why we're doing it that way. And it's important to be able to say no, because the business logic should reside someplace else in some of these examples. Right. Or why are you doing this? Let's validate why you're doing it, because it could be from an imposed limitation from a system 300 years ago that people just kept that process going.
Yeah. It's and why.
Yes.
No and why.
Why.
I mean, it's my biggest compliment that I ever got was a project I did in Hollywood, actually. It was a company that do the one sheets and posters and trailers for movies. And when the project was over, the project manager looked at me kind of, I'm amazed how few customizations you got away with doing, because I kept saying no. I mean, they did jobs, right? I mean, so I think that's where, kind of a little bit of a sidetrack, but not quite. I mean, that's where I had first gotten a design from a consultant who had gone there, and he said, we'll do this to the jobs module. And the more I looked at it, it's just kind of like, why are we even using the jobs module? We're using the job card, and then we're custom making everything else, or we'll be bastardizing everything else. Why don't we just create our own that and not interfering with the standard product? I think sometimes it's okay to start from scratch for something. It's okay not to rely on standard functionality if you're only using a very small portion of it.
It is. It's good. Some of those good points that we have there. Kris, are you on your phone?
No, I'm actually on my MacBook.
Oh, I was wondering what you were doing there. I don't mean to jump off again. I'm just looking at you in your Tesla, and I'm just trying to see, because your internet connection's a little bit slower for processing, but this is better than when you're at home. I'm just letting you know. So maybe you should do this more often. I wasn't certain if you're on your phone or what you're doing. So you're sitting in the car with the laptop on your lap?
Yeah, actually, there's it's sitting on top of 2 water bottles, and it's pretty stable on this MacBook. So I'll keep it there.
Well, that's some dedication.
I mean, when you do development, you have to improvise sometimes. I get it.
Oh yeah, you know what? And even if you're on vacation, right, as a consultant and as a developer, you bring your laptop with you, even if you're on vacation. So it's just one of those things I hold on to. It's weird.
I know, but I did not. I was actually just in Seattle on Sunday, and the last Sunday we did. My wife and I did an Alaskan cruise out of Seattle, and I gotta say, Port of Seattle is doing it right. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but if you take a cruise out of Seattle, you fill out a form while you're on the ship, and in part of your this on vacation package is your boarding pass and some stickers to put on your luggage, and you don't see your luggage until you arrive home at the airport. It is awesome.
Yeah, it's cruise season too, so you probably off of that pier there, and you're walking distance to like Pike Place and all that stuff.
we were actually further north.
Further north, like Everett area or something like that.
Yep. But no, I mean, it's and I almost brought my laptop, but I did not. I decided, nope, I'm on vacation.
See, you got it. You said no to
You
yourself.
need to detach. I have yet to learn how to do that. I have been able to detach for a period of time. But the detaching, I think, is important because you do need to recharge your batteries.
Yep. And that's actually how I started on cruising, but of course now all cruise ships have internet. But when I started cruising, they did not. So it was easy to say, I'm on a cruise ship. I couldn't even talk to you if I wanted to.
Yeah, fully disconnected. No,
Yep.
yeah, I get it. It's like it's as much as you want to say no to clients, you got to say no to yourself sometimes.
Yep.
It's a learning process for me as well.
Yes, you have to do that. What Kris and I joke sometimes, you just have to check out for a period of time. Like with him, he's on vacation right now. I tell him he has to check out for everything other than the podcast.
Other than this, I don't like
other than the podcast. The podcast is the only thing that we decided that we don't check out for. So if we have something scheduled,
we love doing it.
We stick with it because we appreciate talking with everybody in the community just for the passion of the product and the passion of what's going on. And I personally like to enjoy hearing everybody's stories and learning what they do, what they've done, where they're going. So that's why.
And we found someone been in the nav space longer than you, Brad.
But I'm thankful that he thinks a lot like me. Oh, I think a lot like him because he's been in it longer. I'm sorry, I had to correct myself. We have a lot of similar thoughts, so maybe it's
all it does is it's validating myself. Let me see if I can tap you on the shoulder too.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we're all validating here.
No, I mean it is funny because I have sometimes I do have the imposter syndrome, as they call it nowadays, right? Where I'm just kind of like, am I being weird? Am I the only one that think this is BS? Or what's going on here? Because sometimes I read some stuff and I'm just kind of that makes no sense whatsoever. Right? And it's again being a dinosaur and and I'm in this world very completely random. I mean, if you go all the way back, when I was in 9th grade, I wanted to be a chef. And I mean, to this day, I still enjoy cooking. But I was student body president at my elementary school in the northern part of Denmark, and so I spoke with the vice principal and the principal on a semi-regular basis, and I was a crossing guard as well. And as the reward for being a crossing guard was we got a week off and go skiing in Sweden. And
oh wow!
And that's where the vice principal told me, no, you need to do this as a computer assistant. That was a new education in Denmark for basically the role was going to be you work in an office, but you're the liaison to the IT vendors. So that's what I did, and I ended up at the furniture manufacturer doing navigation there, and production planning and stuff like that. I mean, I was just as much admin as I was IT, right? And I mean, completely random that I ended up in this world. I mean, and I've talked to a lot of people over the years, and I realize how lucky I've been, because if you looked at my homework when I went to school, I did not put in the effort. I was a firm believer in let's see if I can translate this to the American grade system, right? But hey, if it takes a C to pass, then that's all I need to go for. There's no need to go to do anything else for that. So
yes,
I am.
Someone asked me one time, "What do you call a doctor that graduated with a C?"
A doctor.
A doctor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you just made me think of that saying when you said that.
Yep. No, I mean, and that's the thing, right? I mean, it's, and I think it's because back in those days, I didn't have great aspirations of becoming a physicist or a scientist or whatever, right? I just, I like to cook, and so I was going to be a chef. So, I didn't German, and English, why would I care about learning those languages, right? I mean, in fact, my English grades were worse than my German grade when I went to school. But here we are. I've almost lived half my life in the U.S. and And so, I'm stuck here now.
No, and I'm glad you are, because now I will communicate with you far more than we do, because we have the same thoughts, and I'd be like, do you see this? Does this make sense?
Yep.
And then we both can go at it together and we'll be like, forget this. This doesn't make sense, guys.
Exactly. Yep.
You're going crazy. Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. We really do appreciate you and all that you do for the community and the conversation, and now giving me validation, as well as teaching Kris how to drive his Tesla. So I'm looking forward to hearing how that experience goes. Kris, if you crash, it's not on us. Or nope. I didn't even say anything. It's not on him. It's on you. I'm just letting you know.
I mean, I will say the screen in the middle takes a little bit getting used to it, but honestly, give it a week or two and you won't. I mean, I remember when I got mine, I was just going, I need to buy the HUD display and yada yada yada, and I never got around to doing it. And now I'm just kind of no, it just
that's normal.
Second
just
nature.
Drive.
Yeah.
I have to get one now, or drive one to see if I like it. Yeah. Kris, you can play those games on those displays, I hear, too.
I heard you can take calls. There's like a go-to meeting or something, like some meeting that you can take. Yeah, there's an app in here. Someone must have installed it. And I was like, whoa, you can take meetings. That's interesting.
Yeah. Which model are you driving?
This is a Model 3. There's two options with Hertz, Model 3 and a Model Y. So I pick a Model 3. Had a bigger trunk, a little bit bigger, I guess, backside. So it's perfect.
It's the Y and the 3 is what 80-90% the same. So I have a 3. My neighbor down the street just got a Y. So, but
we have a few of those up here, but a lot of people up here still just have trucks. Wintertime. I mean, I don't know how the Teslas do in the winter and the snow and the ice. But...
I mean, it's the most sold car in Norway, so.
Oh, so maybe
there's all-wheel drive in these things.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to look into those more because I need sense. But again, thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Absolutely.
We do appreciate it.
Fun.
We do value your time. We know when you're out there consulting, it's difficult. But would you tell everyone how they could get in contact with you if they had any questions, or to see some of the other great things that you're doing?
Sure. I mean, I'm on. Well, I mean, so I want to stress I don't do a hell lot for the community. I just, I like to be around. So I'm a hang around, and
that's doing a lot for the community because we see you hanging around everywhere. So you help push things along.
So I'm on Twitter at @TheDoubleH, TheDoubleh, and I kind of have a blog going. It's been a while since I've had time to update something, but I actually am planning, and maybe if I announce this, I'll actually finish it. But I am actually planning on a blog series on give the user a chance, right? Because that's been my philosophy in this thing for a long time. Where I see a lot of solutions where but how would the user know this, right? I mean. So I have planned a blog series on that. I mean, the ellipses and use some of those things as a developer. So to give the user a chance to understand what's actually gonna happen. And I'm also trying to convince myself to submit that as a session for Direction Semir. I will be there. I booked my flight. I paid for my registration. So hopefully I'll see you guys in Lyon this fall. And
I am interested in reading your blog series on that. I think that's excellent. 2, I think you should submit that as a session because I think you get a lot of attendance. 3, I booked the hotel. That's it.
Okay. Well,
I booked the... from our last conversation, I don't know if you want. I know we were talking with Steve, but
you to go now.
It was the hotel because I wanted to get it before it filled up. Yep. Airline getting over there. I want to spend extra time. I haven't figured out yet when, but I figured I'll be able to fly there. Registration. I'm going to submit a session myself, but you get the chance if you submit, they'll kick it back to the price if you don't get picked. So now that stuff's easy to me. It's where you're sleeping. In this case, to me, is the most important.
Yeah,
so
exactly. You don't want to be
we'll be neighbors.
Yeah, sounds good. But that's so my blog is thedoubleh.dev. And that's me. And I'm always open. I mean, I know people on Twitter. I always tell them, hey, reach out if you don't quite understand my point. I mean, I'm more than happy to discuss it. And I'm also more than willing to accept it when I'm wrong. It never happens, but no, no. I mean, it's. I think it's as you say. Everything evolves so fast. So sometimes the stuff that we knew as being dinosaurs, well, that's a better way now, right? So
correct.
I guess, and then one final thought just before we get off here, I will say I actually find it very interesting to see how many from the GP community who's gotten very active in the BC world, because they've definitely shown us a different approach, right? They have a different background than those of us that come from the nav world, and it's kind of like, you know what, that actually makes a lot of sense. I never thought about that, right? So that's been very fun. I mean, I have a lot of fun following Steve Endov, and we always joke the fact that Steve and I both live in the Southern California, but we only meet in foreign countries or other states. So
that's usually what happens,
right?
Now, the fresh insight, I'll call it, is refreshing. Yep. Because it goes with what we're saying with the why. It challenges sometimes your thoughts, which helps you evolve, because it's very easy to get stuck into it. And Steve is funny. I follow some of his stuff too, and sometimes I don't know what he's doing with all his coffee network and everything. It just I can't keep up, but he makes me laugh. So
cybersecurity stuff too that he does. Yeah. Awesome.
I want him to come to my house and see if he can set up my network to make sure everything's fine.
Yep.
But all right, cheers. Thank you again.
Absolutely,
really do appreciate it.
All right, talk to you guys later.
Right. Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao. Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.